right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Dojo. I have Mark with me. I've been chasing him for a while, and we finally have him. He is a data scientist with NVIDIA. He's also a podcast host. He hosts a conference as well. He wears multiple hats. So, without further ado, let's hand it over to him and let's get to know him a little bit better. So, Mark, how do you wear so many multiple hats? And tell us more about what you do.
So how do I wear multiple hats? So just a bit more about what I do. So I'm a senior data scientist in NVIDIA. I'm a customer-facing data scientist. I like to sort of make that distinction just so that people know that there's many different avenues when you think of contributing from a data science perspective in industry. I run a conference called the Southern Data Science Conference, with switching that to what's called the Optimized AI Conference. So just to make it a little more general, and that's focused on basically getting machine learning to production in enterprises. I have technically I have three podcasts. One didn't launch yet. One called Caribbean Tech Pioneers. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago originally. So I started a podcast just to highlight people who are from the Caribbean, tell their stories, very similar to what you're doing, just to make people at home feel represented and remind them that they're capable of doing a lot. And the other podcast I have is called AI Portfolio. That's interviewing people in the AI space, slightly more geared towards companies and a lot of experts and stuff, a little more on the technical side. And how do I wear so many hats? I think it really comes down to what it is you're sort of trying to achieve, right? So you do a lot of work to maximize your positioning inside of your current job, but
Right.
also it's great to meet people on the outside. And a lot of my success actually has come from all of these extra things that I've done, not necessarily following the school path and following the traditional playbook, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I would definitely second that because I started also like similar to you, pretty new to podcasting, but started putting content on LinkedIn, and immediately I could see a ripple effect of, people reaching out to me outside of my work, within my work, people asking me for more recognition. And so it just kind of has a ripple effect. So I agree, like doing this extra thing has benefit to your work as well as putting your position as a data scientist or as a data person in your field.
Yeah, if I could say one thing that a lot of times people put you into a box based on the title that you have. And doing a lot of these extra things helps to showcase to anyone in the marketplace that you're a very dynamic person or you have many different skill sets versus just sort of what's on your title.
Agreed. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned you are a data scientist, a customer-facing data scientist at NVIDIA. And I also saw that you did your PhD. And I'm curious to know, like, switching from academia to which is more like, behind the scenes and doing all your research heads down, to something which is not just industry data scientist, but also like more customer-facing. What made you take that transition, and how I'm sure you're happy with your decision, but what made you take that leap of faith?
Well, one, I like the freedom of academia. So in academia, you run your show, but at the end of the day, you eat what you kill, right? And I didn't necessarily like the thing of going after proposal. Most times in proposals, you actually do decent research, but depending on if you're doing PhD research, sometimes your PhD research has no bearing on an enterprise application. And for me, when I was doing my PhD and doing a lot of research, I did 2D and 3D shape matching. So while that does have some grounding on some very deep fundamental levels of computer vision, I don't think I was very much excited by that.
Right.
And the concept of going into an enterprise, creating something, proving enterprise value, bringing it to market, trying to sort of gain adoption across the market, that was always more exciting to me. I always had kind of an entrepreneur, kind of flair. So going to enterprise was a natural fit. In addition, just the pay in industry is a lot better than what you get in academia. And then I think the thing that they don't say about academia is that it's one of the most hardcore entrepreneurial environments if you have to bring in funding, because now you have to be a program manager, you have to run students, classes, manage all of that money coming in and the execution. So it's actually a lot harder job to be in academia.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I also got a PhD at many years ago, and I was contemplating the same thing. Like, do I want to spend the next 6 years sitting in a lab, or do I want to make some money and get some recognition? So I'm also curious to know, like you mentioned about the customer-facing data scientist role. And what I do is more on the non-customer facing, like data scientist role. So do you mind sharing like what is the difference? Is it more like a product manager slash data scientist when you say customer facing role?
So my role at NVIDIA is basically to meet with data scientists on the customer facing side and understand what problems that they're trying to solve, and then basically find out overlap with NVIDIA's technology to what that person is trying to do. So if someone's trying to scale up training, you help them to scale up training. If they're trying to deploy models to production, you help them to get those models deployed. So it's all aligned to what that customer is trying to solve in different use cases. And at NVIDIA, we have a ton of different software that people can leverage. In addition, there's lots of experts at NVIDIA. So you sort of either you sort of go joint with a bunch of experts to solve a problem. If you have that expertise, you try to solve that problem yourself with customers, but it's more of aligning, fast tracking people who are in enterprise to leverage GPUs, essentially. The other thing I would share about that is as folks maybe think about their own career path. So oftentimes folks who are very, very technical tend to not like to speak to a ton of people. And speaking to people meaning going through the conversations and maybe talking about a lot of things that are not as technical and maybe as super interesting for technical people. So if you do have that skill set of speaking to customers, aligning it with them, discovering problems, and then also making sure that things get done in a certain period of time, there's a nice space, right? Versus they're super technical. There is folks who are not completely non-technical, really great sort of people skills and working with those relationships. And then there's a space in the middle that's reserved. Not everyone I've seen is able to do it. And it's good to try to push yourself to come into that middle because there's a lot of opportunity.
Right, right. Makes sense. And I know a lot of people, including myself, who are like pivoting to that kind of position where we might necessarily not like heads down coding and those kind of skills, and we are learning how to talk to people and build relationships. So how does one, if you're not already in that field, because when you see job descriptions, otherwise don't really specify these kind of criteria that you mentioned, like people facing, and maybe sometimes, you get into the job and there are things you can do to pivot your role to such kind of more building relationships focus. So is there like a path if you had to tell somebody who's beginning to pivot to that career, like they have technical skills, they want to build relationships and get in the middle?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a pivot, right? It's more of a function of how you operate in any environment. So for myself, I've always been very curious, right? Why is someone an expert in something?
Right.
Why does this thing work? Why does this thing not work? And really trying to understand those underlying motivations. And so with that curiosity, it naturally leads you to go to try to speak to people to understand what it is, what
Right.
is their framing of the world, what are their challenges, and then, hey, I have a certain skill set, they have a certain problem set, where's the overlap, and what's the gap, and how can I begin to fill that? And that's the area of opportunity for you as a, let's say, if you want to pivot into a customer-facing data science role. I think there are many nuances to customer-facing data science role that people don't maybe articulate, and folks who are really, really good. There's lots of soft skills, especially in your speech and being able to hold someone's attention, operating in different business environments. So it's not, it's something that you try to prepare for every day. And it's sort of a shift in you as a person, because now you're just taking all of your data science skills. Now you're trying to match that into the vocabulary of someone who's not as technical. And then you try to get them to see what are the gaps and how your positioning of knowledge is able to help them guide towards a solution. And the last thing I'll say there is that if you think about it from a first principles perspective, it's really all about people. Even if you're insanely technical and you don't talk to customers, you have managers, you have team members, you have stakeholders all within that business. So everyone has a customer. So it's that notion of satisfying your customers that becomes, you just bring that a little more to the forefront of what you're trying to do. I do have one other, well, I have a couple of things. Speech. I think speech is one of the most important things. And what you have to think about is, can a business put you in a room to control, based on what you say, a $10 million, $100 million contract will be on the line? Okay, and that's both from a technical perspective in addition to representing the company well enough to build confidence in that customer that you can deliver.
Makes
So
sense.
if you position the problem that way, it
Yeah.
pushes you to act in a certain way.
Yeah. I see like a lot of people who have like a sales engineer title kind of do that at the moment, but it would be so much better if people who have more technical knowledge, who have been more hands-on, if they can actually do that. So it makes sense that what you have said, like talking to companies and convincing them of whatever money to put their money into your company or your business. Typically what I've seen in my company and many other companies is that sales engineer does that part, but they do lack
Mm-hmm.
the technical knowledge. Like sometimes they are vague or they don't know certain answers and they overpromise, and that kind of leads to issues later on. So it's good if somebody who has a technical knowledge can go to that path and take that. So interesting.
Yeah, to keep it honest, that's always the hard part, because sometimes things move so fast, and sometimes that's a part of the game as well, is to make sure that you're honest and keeping folks who are not as technical honest in there when they say certain things, because oftentimes words are very overloaded. So when
Mm-hmm.
someone says AI, that can mean anything, and you as a technically grounded person always has to bring that discussion back to what are the facts, what are these actual definitions of the words
Yeah.
in the context of the scenario we're speaking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of AI, I'm sure people are really bugged of this question, but I keep asking all my guests, like, you've been in the industry for a long time, even before the Gen AI buzz or even the machine learning era, or all these buzz words were invented. So, what do you think? Like, is it gonna sustain? Is it just a bubble like crypto or something, and it's gonna have its downfall, and people are gonna get back to some other buzzword? What do you think about generative AI at the present moment?
Um, Personally, I think it's a new way of thinking. It's a new accelerated way of doing things. And
Hmm.
how we were going to try to solve problems before is that we were trying to create these models of generalization that just didn't necessarily have the capacity
Hmm.
to generalize. And I like to think about interacting with a human about a topic. So there's so much variation in speech and the
Right.
way that different people speak, especially like I come from the Caribbean. So I will start talking like I'm from the Caribbean, and I'll start to say some shit. And if I'm speaking to another Caribbean person, we're on the same page. If I'm speaking to someone else, it's a completely different
Right.
meaning.
Yeah.
And so I think even if you just ground yourself in that ability to discern a wide array of context
Mm.
without programmatically saying these are what the contexts are, let's say in a customer interaction, I
Mm-hmm.
think has a lot of power when it comes to people in enterprise delivering value for their clients. So I personally don't think it's a hype. I think all of the models and what state of the art will shift, just because there's so much mind share
Right.
behind it, and a lot of really smart people are
Mm.
working on the problem. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually a very good sign as to you coming back to your own grounding as a data scientist. So
Mm-hmm.
you would have, if you're a data scientist, you would have gone through all the traditional machine learning. And then in some cases, a lot of folks get exposure to deep learning. Some
Mm-hmm.
get more exposure hands-on in their job. Some just don't have the data to work on like really serious deep learning problems.
Yeah.
So, but that does not preclude you from recognizing that skill in the marketplace and shifting yourself um, to one, learn and then exercise that skill. So for me, it's all about, if I know Gen AI, if I know deep learning, if I know machine learning, that makes me a stronger data scientist overall, right? So it's not as much, even if let's say Gen AI is complete hype, let's just say,
Yeah.
okay, I learned at that point and I learned fundamentally the bounds of that technology.
Makes sense. Makes sense. But on the contrary, like while it is absolutely worth the hype, I agree. But sometimes I've seen like companies using that terminology because many times, and use cases that not necessarily need like use of LLMs. They
Mm,
want to do it. And that same thing happened with machine learning, something which can be solved by like a simple rule-based engine. We have to use a machine learning model because that's cool at that point of time. So do you think
hmm
emphasize, and I understand like marketing or putting themselves out there, it's important to use what's the hype right now, but actually implementing and using LLMs just because it is state of the art, how do you educate companies and customers on differentiating between that, like your use case doesn't need it, so let's not use it.
Well, I think it comes down to use case expansion though. So oftentimes you might look at a use case and yes, I could solve with a simple rule-based thing,
Mm.
but is there another area where that use case can expand? And that's why I think Gen AI has a little more legs than people think it does. Um, although I do hear you on that perspective of, yeah, there's actually a lot of problems that
Mm.
were traditionally solved. So for instance, like RAG,
Yeah.
people have been doing search for a very long time. They've been tuning search engines for
Yeah.
decades, and now RAG is a new thing. And all of a sudden, tuning RAG systems is this magical thing where people have
Yeah.
just been doing that for 10 years. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's naturally any news cycle that I think pushes technology will get a lot of fervor into it. But at the end of the day, I think it actually comes down to cost too. So I
Yeah.
might recommend, or you or somebody else might recommend an LLM solution, but it
Mm.
might actually be, excuse me, cost effective for
Mm.
that business to implement. So then cost might drive you to come back to a simpler solution in some cases.
True, true. Yes, that's what I've been doing, and that's what I tell people. Yeah, but still, it's like a big discussion. Like, hey, it's okay. We've allotted money for Gen AI initiatives this year.
Mm.
Let's just use it for everything that we have, which is something.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, to that point, it's good if money has been allocated by a business to test the technology. I think it does warrant some of those folks going through that exercise.
Mm.
But at the end of it, they'll have to prove, okay, um, was this the best use of funds for that particular application? And I think that's just sometimes an exploration process that people have
Mm.
to go through as well. I see a lot of that with a lot of people that I work with. They want to see, is this thing real?
Yeah.
And they'll take many steps to figure that out to get to production.
Yeah. I also think part of the reason data scientists or software engineers or people who are building models or doing all that interesting work now pivoting to like using LLMs. Of course, it's exciting, but like at the end of the day, you're doing prompt tuning and prompt engineering, which may or may not be as exciting as building models from scratch, right? So I hear a lot of data scientists like say that, hey, we become prompt engineers, and as long as it's great skill to have, it's not something we signed up for. Like we want to build models, we want to deploy models, we want to scale it up, we want to do all the fun stuff. So how does one data scientist at this age feel motivated that there's still interesting work for them to do?
Hmm. Well, I think data scientists need to check themselves a little bit, right? We've gotten a bit spoiled. So why are we even hired? We're hired to solve a problem,
Mm.
right? Nobody in running a business to be like, oh, I want to hire data scientists so they can train models and blah, blah, blah. And
Yeah.
so we've become very comfortable, in my opinion. So,
Mm.
from that perspective, there's a business need. Is your skill set solving that business need? If you want to go work on that, great. Go find a business that's their bread and butter, and that's where that skill is most needed. So to me, it's more about you aligning your skill set to where has the most business impact oftentimes, or you just go back to academia and you could do as much research or independent consulting as you want. Um, so it really comes down to, that's why I like to index on business value versus I would love to train models all day. I don't get to train a ton of models. I don't have a ton of customer data to work with and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I'm driving value for a business. I'm growing my own skill set. I'm
Yeah.
actually teaching many really, really sharp data scientists how to increase their own skill set as well. So there are these auxiliary things for you to provide value that,
Mm.
yes, it's not as exciting. Not everyone in the world gets to train an LLM.
Yeah.
Most people in the world won't get to, because a lot of companies just don't have that amount of data to, let's say we were talking about pre-training.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and it's going to be a shift. The business is going to call for a different skill set.
Right.
And yeah, if you don't shift, then you kind of get phased out to a degree,
'Right. So I think the number one skill we can say is being adaptable more than anything else.
100%, 100%. So I'll just give a quick example. I graduated my PhD, and
Mm.
then my first job was in the railroad industry. So the advantage of you were not an international student, correct?
I am an immigrant. Like I came from India.
Okay. So did you come as a student and then get the
Yes.
visas and all?
Right.
Okay, so you're an
Right.
international student, so you know the game. So
Yeah.
just similar, exactly like mine. When you come into a job, if you got a job after school, that's like, one of the
Yeah.
that's a blessing essentially, and that's not
Right.
something to be taken for granted. So in your mind, you try to do anything to make sure that you keep that job and show really good
Mhm.
positioning in that business. So I worked in the railroad industry and I became a railroad expert
Mm.
because I recognized a lot of the quote unquote machine learning that I learned was just absolutely not applicable in that domain.
Yeah.
In addition, the direct translation of those techniques
Mm.
to what's happening in the railroad wasn't there. So I had to go learn, understand railroad technology, and then do that mapping back to what corresponding algorithm you're working on.
Yeah.
So it's that because I had that ability and appreciation of going to get that domain expertise and then coming back around to apply my actual expertise, that made me more effective than just a data scientist saying, frame the problem for me and I'll tune a model.
Absolutely. I agree. Like similar to your journey, I got my first job as associate data scientist at a healthcare company. And healthcare companies, or I think, no, just healthcare companies move really slow. So you build a
Mm-hmm.
model sitting there and you're waiting and you're like, as a, young person out of college, you're so excited. I've built this model and patient's going to use it. It's so excited. This is going to take many, 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 many months, maybe years to actually go through all the regulation and stuff like that to actually get out. So, you learn that, okay, this is how models or things work in the real world. It's not like you're building a nice, and at that time, it was not really deployable. You write something on Jupyter Notebook, create some endpoint, and then that's it, you're done. So it was not as streamlined as it is today. So I totally get like you learn a lot of things in the real world while working, things that are totally not taught in college. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. You
Yeah.
said something that I think is important to highlight, is it was in a Jupyter notebook and it wasn't as deployable.
Mm.
And personally, I've almost switched to becoming a completely inference-based data scientist. So I primarily focus on inference at this point. And it's, I think, the biggest skill gap in the market. It's also, I think, a very big skill gap from an education standpoint in school. Like you go to school, you train a model, and no one actually shows you what does this thing look like in a production system. They might show you a chart, but you going through the exercise of doing an assignment and sending load to a system,
Yes.
I think if you can get that skill as a data scientist, you'll be very dangerous in
Yeah.
the marketplace.
Like what I call ML ops, or now these days
Correct.
LLM ops. Yeah.
LLM ops and there's Gen AI ops and generative ops. There's a bunch of fun names.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, there's very a few data scientists I've seen who actually know these skills really well. So if
Yeah,
you're,
I think data scientists are becoming software engineers. I'm pushing myself to be a stronger software engineer more and more every day because I just realize it's just literally all software. It's barely any modeling anymore.
agreed, agreed. That's an interesting point because yeah, that's also something's happening. And a lot of my colleagues are saying like, hey, but we didn't learn like data structures and all those things. Like, yeah, but like, you have to now.
But you learn linear algebra, so you have that capability to go learn data structures. It's just as painful for some of the math that you've learned. But
Yeah.
yeah, we have to learn a lot
But
in
I think there's
shifting.
a lot of advantage in learning software because one advantage, of course, you become a better programmer. I've seen data scientists may or may not be the best programmers. They're a little bit messy in with experimenting. What I have learned in the past couple of months, I was not very familiar with GitHub. Like I knew the basic commands, but I've seen software engineers and working with that ecosystem, how much benefit it is to make things, it's a collaborative platform, but it makes it so much easier. Like your work is immediately, shared. You can go back, and I'm really appreciative of so many software principles now that I'm becoming good at using GitHub. So I think as data scientists, just get rid of your ego and just learn these good skills from software engineers, and then you still have your, amazing data skills that you just have best of both worlds.
Hmm. I think, you're talking about LLMs and folks are maybe not as excited that they're not doing modeling.
Yeah.
The top LLM data scientists in the world get paid probably at least some folks might get paid up to 10x more than what modeling data scientists do. So if you're looking for motivation to go, really get good at LLMs, and these are folks who I've been privileged to know some of these folks who actually go write CUDA kernels and get to scale these models to really, really large systems. And it requires very deep software engineering skills and machine learning skills, or more specifically deep learning skills as well. But it's just beautiful to watch what some of these people can do and basically how much they get paid.
Yeah, yeah, that's the biggest motivation. Agreed.
Yeah.
Right. I have one last question. So you're at NVIDIA, and NVIDIA, we all know, has been the talk of the town for past couple of months, and everyone I know at NVIDIA is now a millionaire. So what
Hmm.
what do you? I have seen a lot of people coming and asking like, how do we? Because NVIDIA, unlike other FANG companies, I think the misconception, please correct me, is that it's more focused on like C++ requirements, and as a data scientist, most general audience is more familiar with Python, and the interview also at different other FANGs is different at NVIDIA. So somebody who wants to
Hmm.
is interested in joining in NVIDIA today in the data science field, machine learning, data science, what would you recommend skill wise and how should they go about it?
Skill wise, so for instance, I'm not a very good C and C++ programmer. So we have excellent, I think, some of the best C and C++ programmers A lot of my peers just use Python. So you having that skill set, at least my peers on the um, customer facing data science side. But
Mm.
one of the things that will help you is some deep domain expertise, right?
Mm.
And if you're a customer facing data scientist, let's say at NVIDIA, it's
Right.
very important that one, you can represent the brand of NVIDIA really well, uphold its values, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition, be an SME, a subject matter expert on something that you can bring value to a client, right? If you're on the research side, naturally that bar gets raised.
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to go into, this is like any industry research lab, you need to have a track record of publications. So I've actually gotten a lot of requests of people who they've not published anything and they want to get into more formal research.
Yeah.
That's typically a lot more difficult. I'm very big on career navigation. So sometimes when you want to enter these big companies, it's a lot easier to internally transfer.
Oh,
Right. So today, if you don't have that skill set, you get into the company in a different role that you mightn't think is any hot thing. But at
yeah.
the same time, now you're in that ecosystem. You get to interact with those teams by proxy,
Mm.
or move your way towards if your skill set is not there.
Mm.
And then more and more, if you have the capability of leveraging a GPU, leveraging multiple GPUs, leveraging multiple GPUs is a very unique skill in the marketplace. So if you can show, hey, I can deploy a model across multiple GPUs, I can train a model across multiple GPUs, I understand what it means to do that type of data processing or machine learning processing, et cetera, that puts you in an advantage. If
Right.
you look at some of the NVIDIA technologies and you build something with it, that
Mm.
makes you naturally more attractive because now we can say, hey, you actually have hands-on experience with this stuff, and then you can go teach people how to use it and to really leverage the platform.
Mm.
And the last thing I'll say there is whatever you're very good at,
Yeah.
be very, very good at it.
Mm.
Right? It's impossible to expect someone to be good at everything. And
Absolutely.
I think we index a lot on what is your ability to learn and your insane ability to adapt. Because today I might be working on this, literally I'll get an email and I have to drop all of that and go learn something completely new.
Mm.
So your ability to drop things,
That's
depending
it.
on which org you're in, naturally. But your ability to shift and learn is very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. And that the good advice that you gave is like, just get your foot in the door. If you're not ready for that role, and just like switch over to that role that you want. That's something that a lot of people at FAN do. So yeah.
Yep.
All right. Last question. I think you partially answered it in one of the questions, but I still want to ask you again, like, is AI going to take all our jobs?
Is AI going to take all our jobs? My personal opinion is you just need to keep working. I don't know. I try to stay away from some of those questions when it comes to I think you should look at tasks,
Mm.
right? So every AI system is able to do a task.
Mm.
And if you understand what is your overlap of your particular role in that task, and at the end of the day, it's incumbent upon you to stay really current in your skill sets and to make sure that you're shifting as well if something is going to happen. That's
Yeah.
what I would say.
Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. All right. So last section we move and we ask you like some questions and you have to come up with the first thing that comes to your head without thinking.
Gotcha.
Let's start. One book every data scientist should read.
Mm,
Not necessarily technical, something.
yeah. One book every day. I have a lot of books. Yeah, so I want to say that's a very difficult question. Um, hmm. One book every data scientist should read. Oh, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. That's one book.
Mm.
It'll
Okay.
teach you how to come out of this I want to do what I love kind of
Mm.
mindset to I need to get very good at what I do. Then I'll find what I love, and then I'll have a lot uh, more career capital. That concept of career capital is super important.
Very much needed for us, data scientists.
Hmm.
Your favorite ML algorithm or any data algorithm?
Any data algorithm? Hmm. I don't think I have. I don't think I have any. I'm really fascinated by LLMs these days, to be honest, and
Yeah.
exactly how things work on a GPU, especially on the inference side,
Yeah.
and all of the different types of attention mechanisms. That gets me very excited and confused sometimes.
Yeah. Back in school, I used to use like XGBoost for everything because I used to think like this
Yeah,
is the best.
I see a lot of people doing that, and I don't think I'd gotten a lot of opportunities to use XGBoost
Mm.
throughout my own career. But transformer models I think are fascinating.
Yeah. Biggest data science myth.
Biggest data science myth. Ooh, these are good. These are really good questions. Biggest data science myth that I think you need to be a great data scientist, you need to know everything. I don't think that's the case.
In general.
I think, yeah, your ability to come in and learn a problem really quick, I think is just as good as you having this huge bank of knowledge in your head. Because sometimes we just try to compress all of these classes and learning material into our mind versus just maybe coming up on a problem, having good, really first principle skills to then execute and figure out what to do from there.
Yeah, always first principles. So you do give a lot of advice to people on career navigation, but what's the best advice that you received so far?
The best advice that I've received so far. Ooh, this is also a tough one. I consume a stupid amount of advice. But the one thing I would say is that when you show up in front of someone, remember that you literally have one instance in order to make that impression. And it's very, very good to practice sort of that outward appearance look, because people judge people.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think, every moment you're talking to someone, someone is judging you, you're judging someone. And so as much as you can take away, I'm just focused on maximizing opportunities for anyone else or myself. So as you think about maximizing opportunities, it's about what can I remove from that decision-making process that would prevent someone from giving me an opportunity? Or what can I do to maximize that in a way that's mutually beneficial? So focus on sort of that overall presentation. When someone sees you in the marketplace, they should know you by your skill. They should know you by your ability to speak, present, drive.
It's ready.
Yeah. And you want to have the elevator pitch. I wouldn't necessarily say it's an elevator pitch. It's more of, can you efficiently communicate? Because if you just rattle off an elevator pitch, I'll already ignore you. Come to me and you just rattle off an elevator pitch. Okay, you're canned. I know you're not adaptable. So your ability to just be adaptable, I think, is probably one of the things to index on.
Makes sense. Very good advice. Your favorite fitness activity?
Favorite fitness activity? Oh, I have a lot of fitness equipment in here. I would say surfing. Surfing is a
Come
very
to
kind of
California?
wild, weird. Well, yeah, California is a different set of waves. I live in Florida, so it's like 1/10 of the wave of California. But I would say I index on surfing and love hiking. Anything where I'm moving my body, I get very excited. Anytime I'm away from a computer, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
I did 2 surfing classes and I have a long, it's very hard. It's very, very
Very
hard.
painful. It's a tough sport. Here's a career hack, well, a surfing hack. If you're not good at surfing, do bodyboarding, because there's no standing. You're just you're laying down the whole time. And you have a lot more fun. You have a lot more fun in that early phase, and it teaches you how to read waves and how to feel, how to be positioned on waves and stuff like that.
It's all about just balancing. It's hard. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
No, night owl, 100%. I've tried. I've oscillated, and I think that's something that people need to. Energy Cycles, a really good book on that, is The Power of Full Engagement. I highly recommend it to everyone to read. What it shows you is that to move away from the misconception of the constant ability to do output versus that varied and you figuring out your own cycle. Like I like to take naps. I literally need to take a nap. Otherwise, I don't function. So at end of every workday, I take a 20-25 minute nap. And the sky could be falling. I'm going to take that nap.
That's nice.
So
I agree. I was forced to become a morning person because I have India and East Coast people.
okay.
But I'm now used to it. But if I was given a choice, definitely night owl.
Do you nap?
Yes, I do. I need my nap.
Okay. Okay. I'm trying to gather data on people who nap, because oftentimes I think the work culture that gets, I don't want to say pushed onto us, but that I think we're most exposed to is just constant on. Versus, allowing your body to just be human and not stare at a screen all day.
Agreed. Okay, that were all my questions. So stop recording. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
Fantastic. Yeah. I would technically ask one thing. So the